Hi, y'all. Welcome to our presentation, Mission Possible, Zooming Through Student Staff Selection. We are so excited to be here today and look forward to sharing our experience with student staff selection this past year. So if we'll just go ahead and start in the chat, if y'all can share where y'all are from, just so that we can see that, like, who we're working with today.
Hello, Megan from the University of Arkansas. Hello, Jordan.
Alrighty, well, we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome, y'all. We're so excited to have y'all here with us today as we share more about student staff selection. We'll start off by introducing ourselves. My name is Connie Rodriguez. I use she, her, and hers pronouns. I graduated from the University of North Alabama, and I graduated with my master's from the University of Central Arkansas, and I'm currently a complex coordinator at the University of Texas.
Hello, everyone. My name is Naomi Sem Lovejoy. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. This is a photo of me and my dog, Rue. I got my bachelor's in psychology from the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, and then I got my master's in CSPA from the University of Central Missouri. And now I'm a complex coordinator here at UT. So before we jump in to kind of explain what our student staff selection process was like, we wanted to take some time to just go over some language that we may be using throughout the presentation, just to make sure that when we're using abbreviations, you all know what we're talking about, because in higher ed, we use abbreviations for everything. And so when we are talking about UHD, we are talking about UT's University Housing and Dining Department. When we say the term CC, we're talking about complex coordinators, so the positions that Connie and I hold. When we say ACC, that stands for our Assistant Complex Coordinator, which is our graduate students here at UT. When we say POV, that is our pool of viable candidates that we will be talking about, and then HR, which we all know is human resources. So that's just to kind of get us started, so that way when we're going throughout the rest of the presentation, you know what we're talking about when we say those abbreviations. So to get us started today, I'm going to launch a poll for you all to partake in. And the poll is, what type of process are you doing for spring 2021? So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. The options are virtual process, in-person, combination. Maybe you've already completed your process in the fall, or if you are undecided. And so we'll leave that open for a little bit, and then I will go ahead and end that in a second. Maybe like 5 more seconds, and then I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. Alrighty, so it looks like about 87% of us are doing a virtual process. And then it looks like there's about 12% of us that are going to be using a combination of virtual and in person. That just kind of helps us see what everyone else is planning on doing to kind of guide our presentation. So I'm going to pass it on to Connie.
Alrighty, so here at the University of Texas, we actually conduct our process in the fall. So we have completed our hiring process for our staff for fall 2021, spring 2022. So we're glad to share with you all today what we did to complete that process. So in the beginning of our process, within the early planning, we do have different committees that each of the CCs and ADs serve on. So I am the chair of the selection committee. Naomi also works on that committee, and she was a part of our RA subcommittee. So in the beginning, we had to review the dates that we had set aside from the previous year. Every spring, we set the timeline for the following semester or the following academic year. So that's also when we confirmed our marketing and marketing posts, since we were then able to finalize our Zoom dates and our interview dates were good to be set and moved forward with like the updates that we had received over the summer. We also created our subcommittees. So we have two subcommittees within our selection team. We have a DA hiring subcommittee and an RA hiring committee. So we currently have a committee of 4 CCs or grads that serve on there. Then I have my advisor, who is an AD, and then we have 2 human resources representatives that are with us along the process to make sure we were following HR guidelines. So with that being said, we split the team in 2. So Naomi and Christian served on the RA subcommittee, and my other 2, Jared and Kaylin, worked with the DA subcommittee. And I worked on both, meeting with them on the opposite weeks of our committee meetings. So with that, we made sure that our timeline was ready and set, which you all will see throughout our presentation, each section of our timeline of how we moved forward with the semester. And then within the early planning as well, we also had information sessions. So here at the University of Texas, with our process, we do information sessions for those interested in the position. So in order to receive an application to our process, they must attend an info session. Within that info session, we used one Zoom link for all sessions so that we didn't have multiple links floating around. And the session was led by a committee member and a CC who opted to also volunteer. A facilitator guide was created by Naomi so that we all followed the same script when presenting information about the position and the positions that we had available. So with that, we were able to make sure that the students that were applying for the position had background and knowledge of what the position was, and that we just didn't have an influx of random applications to receive and go through. And then with that, an important thing with selection is the marketing. So we wanted to see what type of marketing y'all use when it comes to marketing your selection process. So I'm going to launch that poll here. And we'll have it open for a couple minutes while y'all are selecting your questions for that. We'll share a little bit about our marketing. We use flyers through our marketing department. So we had posters printed. Part of our marketing is using our current student staff to show the diversity amongst our team. And they go up in each of our residence halls to be able to see those marketings as well. And this year we also incorporated the apartments within our process so that CA position was also available through our process as well. So I'll give it one more second and we will end that poll. Okay, so we have about 29% of social media, 29% flyers, 12% newsletters, and 29% emails. So that's pretty good breakdown variety of marketing tactics.
Awesome. So as Connie mentioned, throughout the presentation, we'll be going through our timeline phases. And just like we talked about in the last slide, our first phase of the timeline was all of our information sessions. Remember, it is required that students attend one of these info sessions to receive an application for the RA or CA position. We listed out our original 5 dates on this calendar, or on this timeline, for each of our info sessions. Each info session was about an hour, hour and a half. We had, like Connie said, a facilitator's guide we went through that just kind of talked about what it is like to be an RA, what opportunities you have as an RA or a CA at UT Austin, what it could be like to be one of our living learning community RAs, and a whole bunch of other stuff. These info sessions also wrapped up with a Q&A panel with current resident assistants and community advisors, so that the participants for these info sessions could ask any specific questions that they had, maybe regarding the application or the position in itself. Just to kind of give you all some background and some data on the applicants, we went back to 2017. So as you'll see, there is a list of from 2017 to 2020, how many students we had in attendance at our info sessions, and then we compare those to the numbers of applications we received. So as you can see, 2019 was our highest year of session attendees, where we got 721 people to attend, and we actually also got 550 students that applied. This year, in 2020, we did see a decrease in our session attendees. However, we believe that that is due to our occupancy numbers and COVID-19, and just how many people we have living in our halls in general, and how many people are also uncertain, right, of like what the RA and CA position looks like during a pandemic. And so the one thing, though, that we are really proud about is that we closed the gap between the number of attendees that we had and the number of applications we received. So this year we had 288 students attend sessions, and then we received 276 applications. So there wasn't as much of a gap of like people that showed up and then they were maybe like, not for me. We saw a majority of our students that attended sessions apply, and so that was really great.
So then we move into the second phase of our timeline, which is our application process. So that you'll see, like, we had the application open and the application closed. They have it about roughly a couple weeks to submit that application, and then the invitations were sent at the end of the month. So because we do scoring in between that time, that you'll see in the next follow-up phase, and then the return application that was being sent to our student, staff, or returners in that process of how we return staff that are currently already working for us. So with our application process, we do our application process through a Qualtrics form. So within that Qualtrics, they are able to apply for multiple positions. So as I stated earlier, we did incorporate the apartments position this year. So there was the RA, which is for our residence halls, and the CA position, and also our LLC RA position, which is the students that work with our living learning communities. They have additional questions to answer if they're interested in working with one of those communities. So based on the positions that they selected, they received questions that were populated within the Qualtrics form to get their interest in the positions that they had applied for. So then once they submit those applications, we had to download the Qualtrics forms. So with that, Naomi worked to download the Qualtrics forms and get them into a format that were easy to read for the staff that would be scoring the applications. So the applications were scored by our pro staff, so CCs, admins, ACCs, and AEDs all were a part of the scoring process. So this year, with the lower application numbers, on a regular year, we would score anywhere from 25 to 30 applications. This year we averaged about 10 to 15, depending on who got assigned those applicants, and you were paired up with an interview partner. So they were being scored by 2 professional staff members to give them a score average. So after the application scoring closed, we did move forward with 197 candidates to interview. So there was an initial cut. Not everybody got an initial interview. Within that same application as well, we utilized Excel spreadsheets to do the scoring. So this year they got like the individual sheets to score. So if Naomi and I were scoring partners, we were the only ones that had access to that data to be able to score and then submit to the committee. This kept it to where we weren't all accessing each other's data and being able to like accidentally delete somebody's scores. It was all kept in one spot, and only the committee and those scoring had access to it as well. So with the interview invitations, our HR team helps us out with that. So they utilize signup.com to schedule all 197 of our interviews. So once we got the numbers of those who would be moving forward, we sent that list over to our HR team, who then sent the links out for the applicants to sign up for an interview time, which is super helpful, not having to work with multiple sheets and different things. We got it all transported from one site. And then for our intent to return applications, we also utilize a Qualtrics form. So within that Qualtrics form, the students are basically telling us, our current staff are basically telling us, yes, I plan to return. And then they give us the option of like transferring. So they tell us, or I want to return to my staff, or they list the buildings that they're interested in being transferred to, which we'll cover later in our presentation, what our transfer process looks like.
So as Connie mentioned on the previous slide, we do have a specific structure for our application scoring, and so I just wanted to go a little bit more in depth on that. Our scoring began on October 7th, and then we gave our scorers until October 21st to score. So that gave them about 10 days. That gave them more than a week just to make sure that, it's student affairs, everyone has one-on-ones, everyone has team meetings. We want to make sure that they had enough time to build it into their schedule, to make sure that we were being consistent with scoring, and to make sure that each candidate had a fair opportunity to move forward in our process. So for the setup, we had 2 scores per candidate, like Connie had mentioned. There were 5 questions per application. This year, we went back to the Excel sheet that Connie had mentioned in the previous slide. Just to give you some background, the year prior, we went to a Qualtrics scoring sheet, and the Student Staff Selection Committee received feedback from our Res Life team that, as much as we want to move everything to Qualtrics, that might not have been the best way to do it. And so we listened to that feedback and brought it back to the Excel sheet, which everyone was very excited for. Our staff utilized a rubric to score each question, and that rubric is created using Bloom's, which we all know about. It's important to note that all identifiers and names were removed from applications before we sent these off to our scorers. And then we went over this plan with our scorers as well, right? Like we expect them to take 15 minutes per application, block out 5 hours to schedule, which is why we give them 10 days. We hope that everyone's not just doing them all in one 5-hour block. We want them to be able to utilize their time in whatever way works for them. But just giving them that estimate of about 5 hours to score, and then to make sure that they fill out their Excel sheet correctly. It was extremely important that we gave everyone individual box folders and individual spreadsheets, just to minimize the error that could happen of, 30 people on one spreadsheet. Numbers could change, they can edit a wrong row, and so it was important for Connie and I just to use that to streamline the process and to make sure it was consistent.
Okay, So Naomi's going to drop a message in the chat just to see how long is your process for interviewing. Like we have a 2-day process where we interview on Friday and Saturday, and that completes our interview process for the days. So just try to get a guideline of seeing if we're using one whole day, or is it multiple days, or is it a few weeks to utilize. So just drop your answers there so we can see what's going on with that. And that way we can also talk about that later as well. So here's our phase 3 for the interview day. So we, like I stated before, that we did have 2 days of interviewing. It was on Friday and a Saturday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then we did have a makeup interview day to be able to schedule those who may have missed. Things come up, so we could work with those students and still get them a interview. And then the deadline of the intent to return. In that spreadsheet, Naomi came up with a fun way to knock out a process that was traditionally done in person and do it virtually, which was super helpful this year, especially with the time that we had given and the change within our calendar. And then the selection day itself, and then the offers being extended. The reason it's all done within the semester here is so for those that may not get a position, they are able to also look for alternate housing if they choose to live off campus, if they didn't get the position, or whatever their choices may be. It varies from student to student. So prep for interview days was a lot of fun. Involved a lot of math this year and streamlining to make sure that we were being effective with time, with our students' time and with our pro staff's time to get all these interviews conducted so that we can bring new team members into UHD Res Life with properly utilizing our time, right? So like I said, it was 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. There were breaks in between, and they were done in like chunks of time and rotations, because we also implemented a different style interview rotation this year as well. Once again, we didn't want to have too many Zoom links floating around, so we had one Zoom link created for each interview day. So that it was, if for some reason, or for the process as a whole, so if my interview was on Friday and I magically showed up on Saturday, I would still be able to speak to somebody to be like, oh, wait, I was supposed to be here yesterday. We were able to like work with them and still get them in. So that was helpful, that they were still going to be able to talk to somebody during that time frame without being lost in a Zoom room by themselves. So there was a lot of communication between our committee team and the student staff that helped work our process. Like we couldn't do it without them. So we have each RA worked 1 to 2 shifts. Each pro staff member worked all the shifts with the exception of our GAs that worked half the amount of shifts due just to the hours of how we spread their hours during the week. And then our assistant directors also worked 2 shifts out of the 4. And then our admins that filled in the little spots of times that we didn't have anybody got anywhere from 1 to 2 shifts. So we had to make sure that like we were prepared, our staff knew what was going on and what was happening, where we also presented at an in-service to review our interview processes, and that's where our HR team comes in as well, and we do some interviewing 101 so that they're prepared to like utilize the Qualtrics that we use in scoring. Something that was very important within our communication for the interview days was our Microsoft Team chats, which Naomi and I conducted for that. That's where if any questions came up during from pro staff, they were able to contact us directly. So that they had a person to talk to. We also had HR on standby. So we had, Brandon was in a separate chat with us on Teams. So if something came up, we also had his cell phone to be able to talk through a scenario if for some reason something came up during our interview process. So that we made sure that we had the guides. Because, you know, technology, likes to be fun. So sometimes like people got like kicked out of the call or their internet connection was weak. But to make sure that they still had the full interview time and got the full amount of questions, we were able to troubleshoot those with HR and get them taken care of. So our day of roles, I navigated the breakout rooms. So we had 25 candidates at a time that would come in to our Zoom room for the hour. And they would see 3 different sets of interviewers. So this gave us the opportunity to be able to like work with them, which we'll go into a little bit more detail later. But adding people into different rooms for each interview cycle. So as they came out of rooms, I was reassigning. So I was it was like a waterfall effect. So it was a little easier than what it sounds. So like they would come out of a room and they would go into the next room and it would just like waterfall down, clicking them into a new space, which we also had that spreadsheet in our chat as well. Naomi was the problem solver of the day. So if there was a question that came up or if somebody knew a candidate, she was able to relay that information to myself. We were also on the Zoom call together. So when we didn't have candidates in the room, we could talk that way, or we also were in our offices so we could pick up the phone and call if needed. So then we had a pro staff interviewer and 2 student staff interviewers in each room. So it was 1 pro staff, 2 student staff in each of our 25 rooms for the couple hours that we had them. It was a lot of fun. Then we had floaters, another fun position. So this was the one that you got to sit with me and Naomi in the room. If somebody knew somebody, you would be magically placed into a room to be ready to interview, and that person would come out. So those roles were for more experienced RAs. So those roles were mostly given to our RAs that have been in the role for a while, or our senior RAs were the bulk of who were our floaters.
So we're going to continue talking about interview days because that was a huge bulk of the process that was changed. So in person, no more, via Zoom. Connie navigating breakout rooms, myself troubleshooting with HR and Connie and all of our floaters to make sure that like if we had an internet connection issue, we were able to pop someone in there. It's also kind of fun in Zoom when you just like remove someone from a room and they just kind of magically appear back in the main room and they're like, oh, okay, hello. And then they get to hang out with Connie and I for an hour, which is always a fun time. But the other big change that we made with interview day is while we were kind of brainstorming as a committee how we were going to make Zoom work and try to at least like minimize the challenges that doing a completely virtual process was going to give us, was the transition where we usually have a group process occur to no group process this year. We made that decision after really carefully examining a lot of different things that we thought would go wrong. So one of those things was like, okay, we have a group process where maybe there's 10 candidates in a room with 3 RAs, maybe 2 pro staff members. What happens if one person doesn't have internet connection and drops out? Does the group process continue? Do we stop? Does that make it a fair and equitable process for all of our candidates? And ultimately, we just decided that the risk was far greater. And so we decided to remove our group process this year from Zoom. Because we removed our group process, we kind of had to go back to the drawing board and figure out what we were going to do to kind of make up for that. And so instead, we decided to move to 3 rounds of interviews that Connie had mentioned before. And so just to give you more of an in-depth breakdown, we had 25 candidates each, like 25 candidates were in one group. That group would be here for an hour. Before the hour started, we had a 10-minute staff check-in with our grads, our RAs, our pro staff, our admins, whoever was going to be interviewing that day, just to kind of answer any questions, give them a rundown before we put them into their breakout rooms. Once we put our staff into their breakout rooms, we then had a 10-minute candidate check-in that Connie and I led, where we admitted all of the candidates we were interviewing in that hour. to the main room. We welcomed them to the session, talked to them about what the 3 interview blocks would look like, shared with them if you lose connection, we sent you the phone number, make sure that that's how you're dialing in, just kind of giving them the rundown of what the day was going to look like. We then had 3 rounds. Each round was 20 minutes apiece. There were 4 questions each round. And as Connie shared, there was 1 pro staff and 2 student staff members in there. Between each round of interview, we added 5-minute buffers. Again, this is something that we did just to try and mitigate like a challenge that we could have faced with technology. 1, it was great for the candidates because they got to come back to the main room, take a breath, get some water, go to the bathroom if they had to. 2, it was great for Connie as the person doing the waterfall and getting people into breakout rooms to just give us some extra time to do that. And then 3, it was great because then our interviewers had time to really like complete that interview guide and submit it via Qualtrics and then set up their next interview guide to fill out for their next candidate. Or if they looked at their next candidate and said, oh, I know that person, we had 5 minutes to kind of switch interviewers out as well. So I would highly recommend the buffer time. It helps the process completely. We did have makeup interview day. We as a committee just worked to schedule those interviews. So Connie and I would pull from our individual staff of RAs to just kind of see if anyone was willing to help out that day. We really only had a few makeup interviews that we needed to do. And it was important for us to continue that like strong relationship with HR, for HR to be in the process of like approving those makeup interview days. So an example could be like a family member in the hospital and them not being able to attend their interview. That is something we work around. Something of like, oh, I just forgot my interview time. That might not be something we approve, just because like, does that really show us how interested and engaged you might be in this process as an RA? And so working with our HR to approve those reasonings was really important for the consistency of the process that all of our candidates went through. So as Connie mentioned, we do an intent to return application, which allows returning staff to rank where they would like to be placed. This is something that typically the returners fill out. And then this process, the conversation of like, do we want this person to transfer to another building or do we want them to stay within our team, happens during selection day. As a new person to the committee, I was like, we should change that. And so I created a spreadsheet to see what HR thought, what the committee thought, what our leadership team thought to kind of streamline the process and then try and shorten our selection day because I'm sure we all know selection days can be long, they can be challenging, there can be tough conversations happening in there. While it's a fun day, it can still be a stressful day as well. And so let's try and streamline that, and we were able to do that by taking the intent to return conversation out. So as our returners filled out their application, the committee was pulling the applications from Qualtrics and creating a spreadsheet for CCs and our ECCs to review. Our transfer process took place completely via this spreadsheet. There's an example of a row of what that spreadsheet would look like at the bottom of this slide. So it would have our candidate name, their EID, which is their student number, maybe their current building, which is BRP, the building I oversee, and then it ranked their options of where they wanted to transfer. They can choose 5 additional buildings if they want to transfer. They don't have to choose all 5, they can put 1, and then if they don't get transferred, they would just come back to their original building. There's also a question that asks if they're interested in potentially transferring to be an LLC RA, which again is our living learning communities. So we ultimately pulled all of our intent to return applications into a spreadsheet, color coded it, made it look really pretty, and then we created a schedule for CCs and ACCs to review. So for maybe round 1, we would give them 24 hours. So they would have access to all our intent to return applications. And so for this person, this candidate, they're currently in my building, but they wanted to transfer to Connie's building. And so Connie could go on here and say yes or no within that 24-hour time period. And then we had rounds. So after everyone that had their first preference was chosen, then we moved on to second. And it really helped streamline that process because conversations were happening outside of selection day. So like if this was a candidate that wanted to transfer to Connie's building, I was able to sit with Connie and really talk through that intent to return application and what we thought would be best for that person as an RA and like their development. And then ultimately when we got to selection day, all the returners were already placed on their team's charts. So that helped us immensely.
So then it was time to get ready for selection day, which is all, like Naomi said, it's always a fun time. And it was a process that we also ended up doing virtually as well. There was some talks of possibly doing it socially distanced in person, but it was just so much easier to get everybody into one spot, share screen, share documents, and have everything we needed like in our office space. So we started off by confirming returners and transfers. So after it was closed, after that process was closed, and we had dropped them into their individual building teams. So we knew how many people were already returning to that staff. If for some reason there were some changes and they had updated the committee and their supervisor, we were able to make those changes as well, which then led us to do the calculation of need by staff. So all our staff sizes are different dependent upon the building you are in or the staff you are serving on. So our largest staff is a staff of 22, where our smallest is a staff of 6. So just depending on that, so each calculation was different based on percentage need. We were also given the opportunity during our all res life meeting, which includes our the rest of our leadership in addition to our AD, so our associate director and our director. We're all able to be a part of seeing what our selection day process was going to look like this year. So we were able to give them an update, let them know beforehand, this is what the flow is. This is also the order in which we're picking. So they were able to know, like, okay, Naomi's percentage need is higher than mine. I go right after Naomi, just so that they can have like candidate picks ready within that process, knowing that people will be getting picked up. So within that hiring spreadsheet, only the committee had access to edit. They were able to see the candidates that were available. They were able to see their team. They were able to see other people's teams. We were just not allowing any edits to be made, so that we would know that, like, if I made the edit, the committee could come back and be like, what happened to this individual? And we wouldn't have to backtrack through a staff of 15 people when we could go through like a team of 4. So that was very helpful, so that we didn't have to like re-download recent documents or recent editions of the spreadsheet, because I think by the end of the process, I think it had been edited a total of, there was 240 versions of that one spreadsheet. So imagine if everybody had access, how high that number would be in our box. So we also introduced hiring zones this year as well, and we've already made a couple of changes for the upcoming year, but we have a cutoff score. So anybody above that cutoff score is eligible to be picked up. And then within that, we broke it into zones by like numbers. So like the first 70 top scorers, and then the next so many, and the next so many, just so that we make sure that we are picking up qualified candidates. So this was something that we worked on with our HR team. This is something that's been new to our process. We haven't had hiring zones before. We just had this whole POV of candidates we can choose from, where I could pick, if there's somebody that I wanted to pick up from the bottom, I would be able to do that when there are still candidates that are up in the top half. So we tried that this year. We did get some feedback from our peers. There are some additions that will be made to continue to move forward with that in the years to come, to make sure that we're hiring those who did well within the process. In addition to that, we started off the interview day itself by reminding our teams that we're not only hiring for our individual teams, but at the end of the day, we're hiring for the department. and we work as a department. We work as Res Life. It's not my team versus BRP or BRP versus the quad. At the end of the day, we should be able to work with any team because supervisors also move around. If there's vacancies that become available, Naomi could supervise my staff and I could supervise somebody else's staff. So just being able to work with any team that is picked up, and remembering that we're one team at the end of the day as we work through each day, especially with all the things that come up within the time. So as we were gearing up to get ready for the day itself, we prepped candidate files. Candidate files were a fun time because we also moved it into a format that was easier to read for those CCs and ACCs that would be reviewing data. So each file had their 3 interview guides from all the sections of the interviews that they conducted, their application, and that was their candidate file. And it was dropped off, like it had their name and their EID so that candidates could be easily found and our pro staff could access those files. That did take some time this year. We are in the talks of figuring out what's a faster process and how we can get more people involved. The bulk of candidate files being made was done by the committee. So it was quite a bit, because then when you think about it, there's 3 rounds of interviews, there's 100 or so candidates, and they each get 3 guides. But the easy part was we didn't have to scan interview guides this year. We just had to download documents. So that was a time saver. But there was like the relabeling of folders that took quite a bit of time. So working on that. But yeah, that's the prep. And they had a week to review all those files. And then we had selection day itself. Since we did that transfer process ahead of time, since they were able to review the files longer and know who they were looking at, we did take a 4-hour process of selection day and knock it down into 2 hours. So that week long of transfer process saved us time in the long run for us to be able to do a 2-hour process. As the selections were happening, we then took it down to only 2 team members were able to edit. So as people were being picked up, one of us was highlighting off the sheet and moving them from the pool. The other one was updating the team, the individual teams. And once we ended selection day itself, we read off teams to each supervisor so that they can confirm their selections, so that we can move forward with the hiring letters. So then we extended those emails so the candidates received an offer letter, and their future supervisor was also CC'd on that offer. The candidates had 4 business days to accept or decline the position. We had to work closely with the pro staff members in this process because of confirmation. So if the student only replied to one person, touching base with the supervisor, because sometimes they would only get it or the committee would only get it. So making sure that we were pushing that on through. The candidates who did not get selected remained in the POV. So as we are losing people throughout the semester or other opportunities arrive, we are able to get somebody hired right away and send that to HR. So there were some challenges that we faced this year, as with any process. So the first, we had 3 T's with this one. So the first one was team buy-in. We were making a lot of changes. And so in order to remain that team buy-in from our peers, from our supervisors, from leadership, we let them know what was going on, what was happening, and also allowed them to give us feedback along the way.
One of the other challenges that we've had that I mentioned before was definitely technology. We have to put a lot of trust in something that we cannot control. So trusting Zoom to get us through this process, the way we did that was building in transition times which you could see throughout our interview days, and then just incorporating additional helpers that were able to kind of jump in if someone did have a technology issue that arose.
And then with our timeline, we did move it up. It is a little bit more streamlined than it's been in the past. Whereas last year we were doing our process at the end of November. This year it happened at the beginning of November to be able to conduct all those processes quickly. And also allowing time for our campus partners that we work with within our process as well.
Then we move on to changes within our process, and we had 3 big ones. The first one was definitely data collection. I can confirm that there are a lot of things that we did that are now on Qualtrics, which makes my heart very happy. It is so much easier to download files from Qualtrics as PDFs. We're not scanning papers in anymore. We know that we have all these things just on a second system as well, which is great. That we can compile raw data spreadsheets a lot easier from Qualtrics. We can send over files to HR quicker. If you work with me, you'll know I love Qualtrics, and so that just made my heart really happy that we were able to incorporate that throughout the entire process this year. And we got a lot of positive feedback for our Qualtrics as well. And it's definitely trickled into other selection processes that we've done. So.
And then Naomi spoke about our transfer process. That is a process that we got feedback from our peers on, that they liked it being virtual. So we will be moving forward with that again in the future, just making some adjustments with adding in a little bit more time to rounds in the beginning that have more individuals to look at in the beginning for building popularity.
Then the other big change that we discussed was our group process. Obviously, switching to 3 individual rounds was a transition. I know in higher ed, a group process is very prominent in a lot of our RA and CA selection processes, so making that jump was big for us. However, we did receive a lot of positive feedback because the 3 individual rounds really allowed our CCs and ACCs to see more candidates. And that is something that we've received feedback on before, so they enjoyed this transition, even though group process is probably missed. It also lowered the chance of Zoom challenges, which I talked about, and created a more equitable interview process. Just with it being virtual, we wanted to try and, again, mitigate the risks that we were going to have with technology.
So some things that we have coming soon within this next year, we'll be working on it a lot during the summer. As we currently are doing summer positions right now and DA positions to prepare for the summer. But something that we have coming soon are rotating question banks. So the questions that we have selected for our teams or for our interview processes, making sure that we're hitting those topic areas that we want to talk about, but having them already created so that we can rotate out year to year our questions without having to spend time in our committee meetings or make additional meetings to make new questions. So we'll be working on those.
The other 2 things, we will probably continue doing the virtual info sessions, even though hopefully at one point we can go back to being in person for things, but I do think the virtual info session allowed more individuals to come and just participate if they didn't live on campus, so that was really great. However, we did talk about consistency with virtual info sessions. I think we made a step towards more consistency this year by creating a facilitator guide. However, we have been talking about potentially recording an info session presentation that our students would be able to watch, and then having there be still a student staff panel that they attend via Zoom, and then we would still be able to get those people the applications. So still doing both, but for consistency, potentially just recording an info session. The other thing was a paperless process. If we do prepare for in-person interviews next year, if things somehow magically get a little bit more under control. We have learned that Qualtrics as interview guides is the easiest for our team and for our RAs. So we will continue to use Qualtrics even with in-person interviews. But that does create another challenge, right? Like the technology barrier and accessibility of if we're in person, does everyone have technology available to utilize Qualtrics? And so the committee is looking into resources for our RAs to access technology during interviews, because as pro staff we can use our surfaces, our laptops, things like that, but we need to make sure that we're looking out for our RAs as well to get them that resource.
So that was a little look into our virtual process for this year. It was a time we enjoyed it. It was Zoom actually was great to be working with as a platform to conduct an interview process. We were a little nervous at first, but it worked out in our favor. So we were glad that we were able to utilize that to help out. Any questions that y'all have? If you want to drop them in the question section on your right. We can answer any of those. We can answer them out loud for y'all if y'all have any questions or about any specific part of our process or anything that we can help with the little bit of remaining time that we have left. We'll give it a few minutes in case maybe there are a couple long questions. Yeah.
We'll still do questions, but I just wanted to put this slide up as well, just in case you all didn't have any questions. We have an email that you all can email us at, and then just don't forget to complete the program evaluation as well at the top. But we will stay on to answer questions if people have them.
And we just want to thank you all for being here today and getting the opportunity to share our experience with y'all. We wish you the best of luck in your processes that you all have coming up. It's possible. It is possible. Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah, Quentin, I see your question in the chat. So the question, just in case people can't see it, is with the selection process, how do you navigate with new candidates, their expectations of the RA role changing as we progress through COVID? So with the RA role potentially being different, it could be different again next year. For us, that really changes within our work agreement that our human resources team and our student staff selection committee put together. We did end up adding a clause just to make sure that they know that as COVID-19 does progress, roles, safety procedures, and policies could be changing. But ultimately, that is a conversation that we have as a committee with our human resource representatives, as well as just like any information that our leadership team might have about those changes and how that could affect our RA role. I don't know, Connie, if you have anything else to add to that.
No, I agree with that as well. And we made sure too during our info sessions to also hit on that as well, of just taking note of what do they see their RAs doing now, or if they're not living on campus, sharing with them what our RAs are doing, because we do also have a RA panel as well. But just letting them know the support and things that we have going on from the team. But a lot of the direct questions get answered by our HR team.
Well, seeing that we are not getting any more additional questions, which is a-okay. It is Friday. I feel it. So if you all are good to go, we are good to go. Thank you so much for listening to us. Share all that content with y'all. Make sure you take time to complete the program evaluation. If you do have questions, again, our committee emails at the bottom, and I am so positive that Connie and I will get back to you. Have a great day and a great rest of your weekend. And thanks for attending.
Thank you, Naomi and Connie, for a wonderful presentation.